Thank you. I'm excited to present this research. This research and the idea came from kind of this conversation I was having with my co-authors, which are Darren Dow and Sarah Domer. And we were talking about how, there's a public conversation about how we want to behave in environmentally conscious ways and produce sustainably. But we really see a lot of evidence still that people are buying and selling, of course, products that are overtly environmentally costly. And these products are not necessities. It's not like we have to, do environmentally costly things to survive at all. These products are really luxuries a lot of times. This is, many, many animals went into creating this jacket. This is a shearling jacket. It's a Bottega Veneta jacket. It's $9,000 to wear this around. And even though we have this inclination that we want to do things that are environmentally conscientious, we're still killing more than 2.3 billion animals every year to create products that rely on their hides. It obviously is the case that many activists and even states and legislators are trying to work to eliminate some of this waste and this cost. We have people who are protesting against it. There's certainly many advertisements. And you may remember that California actually banned the sale, the production, the trade of animal hides. But the fact is, when you go into the marketplace, people are still paying extremely high prices for luxury products that are clearly environmentally costly and especially costly to animals. Although we demonstrate that this isn't just an animal phenomenon, this is an environmentally costly phenomenon. And you might be surprised to find out that even with all of this attention on behaving in a more conservative manner with regard to the environment, we're actually year over year consuming more and more of these goods. So, it started out, we have like 12 billion a dollar market for leather and fur, and this is only increasing even with this sort of side conversation about sustainability. So what we were kind of questioning was whether people were buying these products despite the fact that they are environmentally costly, or could it be that they're buying these products because of the fact that they're environmentally costly? Is that actually, in some ways, a positive thing for certain consumers? Obviously not all. Social scientists have long understood that luxury products in general perform a lot of identity validating and identity expressive tasks. So we use luxury products to express who we are, who we'd like to be. And oftentimes after experiences of threat, we use luxury products to validate the identities that we would like. So they have many roles in our lives. And as marketers, we talk about luxury products as a way of expressing prestige, right? So the way that we use luxury products is to demonstrate that this costly item is something that we can afford. We have the means or the cultural capital not only to choose the product, but to pay for the product. And that is a way to express higher social status. This is sort of a universal phenomenon. It not only happens with humans, but this is also kind of in the animal kingdom. Animals also express their high status by using images of prestige or costly signaling. What we don't talk a lot about is this second route to social status. So there are actually two routes. One is to express prestige, but the other is to express dominance. And the reason that we probably don't talk about this is because it's not very socially acceptable to engage in agonistic behaviors that are and images of kind of killing and death, or even power in some ways. So dominance kind of gets short shrift, at least in the marketing literature. But we certainly engage in behaviors that have expressions of dominance. And this is, again, very natural, both to humans and to animals as well. I think, as researchers, we often like to dichotomize things like it's either prestige or dominance. But in fact, people use both, and they can use them simultaneously. If you consider perhaps like a CEO, they're expressing both the prestige and the knowledge, but all to sort of validate their spot in the social hierarchy. But they are also oftentimes expressing a form of dominance. And if you think about certain people between the years of 2016 and 2020, you might say that leadership at that time, in the political sphere, was very much based on or supported by images and behaviors of dominance. Okay, so luxury products, at their essence, are actually sort of excessive. And so it's not a huge surprise that they are environmentally costly. But when we think about dominant products, what does that mean? What we think it might mean is that there are products that essentially can demonstrate to others or validate for the consumer, him or herself, that this consumer has the power and the means to actually consume something for their own pleasure that kills or destroys an environmental good. There's something very dominant about consuming something simply for your pleasure that actually destroys an environmental or an animal resource. As I said, we don't think that everybody is attracted to costly products or costly luxury products. We think that this is mainly individuals who have a strong drive towards status, right? So status exists on a continuum. Some people are more driven to status, some people less. And it's something that people can be reminded of via priming, and that actually exists sort of chronically within us. So high status driving people are especially attuned and sensitive to their place in the social hierarchy. And also, once they attain that, or once they are reminded of wanting to have that status, it's also a precarious position, right? Status can be taken away relatively easily. And so high status individuals are often looking for ways to maintain and reinforce that place in the social hierarchy. So taken together, we suggest that luxury products that also have connotations of dominance are especially appealing to high status individuals, right? So people who want to maintain their status or are worried about their status. These luxury products that have dominance embedded in them are especially preferential. So this is what the hypothesis says, and that idea is driven by their desire for dominant products. So most of the people in this room probably are thinking, well, is this really about scarcity? Like, once you kill something, there are less of them. That is true. And everything is multiply determined. We also think that there's probably some element of scarcity, but we do several different things in our studies to try to hold that constant or eliminate it entirely. So yes, there's probably a scarcity element here too as well. Okay, so I'm not going to show you 9 studies. However, we have done probably 132 studies, but I will show you 3. The first 2 are just kind of the core phenomenon. And the last one, which is study 9, is what do we do about this? Should we just go around killing tons of animals? Like, what do we know, and what can we use this information to tell us as marketers? Okay, So without getting too detailed about the way we ran our studies, what we did in the first one is we reminded people that they either had the desire for more status or we had a control condition. So they were not reminded of that. And then I'm going to show you in a second what we showed them. We either gave them a scenario in which they were consuming a product that was costly, environmentally costly, or not. And then we measured their preference for it in a bunch of different ways, including taste. So this was kind of a fun study to run because we actually had people sampling products. We created a juice. We tried to make it seem like a luxury juice. And we did this by kind of combining a bunch of different juices into one thing, so there was no discernible taste that they would recognize. And we told them this was a cold pressed juice, and it had this special product or the special ingredient called camu fruit, which is actually a real ingredient. And in the control condition, we just sort of described it, that it was a superfood. You probably are all familiar with this kind of description of a juice, and that it was relatively expensive. We gave them a price. And then we had them sample the juice. Okay, in the costly condition, everything the same, except we tell them here, although harvesting these fruits removes the nutrients from their environment, often killing the fauna and flora surrounding it, they are powerful superfoods. So, explicitly telling them that the procurement of camu fruit is actually very destructive to the environment. And, again, we had them sample the juice. What you see here is that when people don't have as strong of a drive towards status, the costly product is less appealing to them. However, when they do feel motivated towards status, all of a sudden they have a preference, or they actually feel that the juice is tastier, it's more desirable, it's more appealing. And we also find that they really do taste a better juice. They say it's yummier. So there's actually an experience of that. Hallie?
Were you surprised by the lack of difference in low status driving?
Yeah, and we did think about that. Why was it that in low status, and we've gotten a lot of questions about that since, actually. And I think that, and we see it much more in future studies, this difference. I think what's going on a little bit is that flora and fauna destruction is just potentially not that concerning for people. We start seeing more of a difference in low status driving when we say, we killed a narwhal for this kind of thing. So, this varies a little bit by how much people think that it's destructive, and probably just how salient the sadness of it is, kind of, or the destruction. Okay, so we demonstrated the basic effect. We did this with priming, so we kind of controlled people's status driving. So the questions might be wondering about is, okay, how did you control for scarcity? And secondly, do people do this naturally, or do I have to really remind them of something to create this effect? In our second study, we used a somewhat different technique of generating status driving and not status driving. We actually used a Claritas panel, and we had two separate panels. And this was something that Han et al. Did in their 2009 paper, and I'll sort of show you the differences between those panels that we pre-tested. Again, we manipulated, so we showed a destructive versus control condition, and then we measured scarcity in this one, as well as appeal, obviously not tastiness. Okay, so here are the two different panels. And if you watch The Housewives, this will be very intuitive. So we had one panel that Claritas calls the upper crust, the nation's most exclusive addresses. It's a haven for wealthy individuals. Many possess a postgraduate degree, have an opulent standard of living, drive expensive cars. And then the second group is the aspiring A-listers, right? So these are going to be sort of the Orange County ladies, focused on their social lives and out and about often, spending heavily on status brands and dining out. When we pre-tested these two groups, what we find is actually that the 90210 group is more validated in their status, right? They're living the dream. But the 92799 group, the Orange County guys, who are exposed to this sort of upward social comparison, have a much stronger drive to status. So it turns out that this is really the desire for status and not necessarily the having status. Okay. What we tell these guys is that we have them look at what you see here, this water feature. Oops. And we tell them that what they are going to do is think about this water feature and decide whether they like it. But we tell them, just as we did in the last study, that the river rocks, the removal of the river rocks disrupts the flora and fauna, same thing, and ultimately has a negative impact on the animals and vegetation that lives there. And here we start to see a much bigger disparity with the low status striving people being much less positive about environmentally destructive products and the high status striving people having a preference for them. Let me move on pretty quickly to the last one just so we can get a sense of what to do about this. So what we thought about was, do you have to kill something to make it seem dominant? Is that part of it? And what we sort of thought about is, can you make something seem dominant just by the positioning? And so our last study was this perfume study. We call it fragrance because we actually gave it to males and females. And what we did is we manipulated, again, whether or not it kills an animal in this case, or whether we can just position it as dominant. Here are the three sort of like the essential ways we did that. In the environmentally costly condition, we tell them that the fragrance also uses snail mucin, and we make it salient to them that you have to kill snails in order to get the snail mucin. In the positioning only, so we don't kill anything, we just call this fragrance brutal, and we tell them that it's a potent fragrance from the rugged outdoors. And the last one, a control condition, it doesn't have really any signals of dominance. So what we're hoping for, and these are the preliminary results, is that there's really no difference between the positioning and the kill conditions, and that the control, actually, there is a difference. What we do see, we do get that, and we have gotten that pretty consistently. We can actually invoke the images of dominance without killing something. And so, from the perspective that that is appealing to certain consumers, I think there is a solution, or at least a potential way of getting around this environmental costliness. I know my time is about up, but I hope that what this essentially gets across is that, rather than ignoring some of the consumption behaviors that we find distasteful, can we learn something about consumers and use that information to create environmentally sustainable, less costly goods that are appealing? And that's it.